Is there a motion to move into open session? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are in open session. Please join me in the invocation. Father, we thank this beautiful day that you've given us and this opportunity to come together and do the work of our school district. Now we just ask you to bless our conversation, that all that we say and do would be pleasing to you, and our first priority would be our children. And we ask this in your name. Amen. We stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Yes, we have one. We're gonna delete agenda action item 7A personnel. And the subsequent deleted in 4A under agenda action.
And is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented with the change?
So moved.
There's a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposition? If you will move into our presentations.
Yep, at this time, we'll turn over to Mr. Snyder for a curriculum presentation.
All right, good morning, everyone. I think I've got everything set up. Marshall, we're good as far as that goes. All right, so curriculum selection, as Dr. Long and you guys were planning for today's board retreat, he reached out and asked that I prepare something as far as how we select curriculum in our school district. Luckily, and we just did a curriculum implementation with our math curriculum K-5. So at Dane and Zach's schools. In some cases, some of the curriculum that we choose or that we use are kind of like the state tells us we have to use certain things. In this case, it wasn't. So I basically decided that we would tell the story, if it's going to go forward. Tell the story of the bridges to math in our new math curriculum. So once upon a time, when I got here, 6 years ago, we were using Eureka Math. As Dane and Zach will know, also, I think it had been in place for almost 12 years.
14.
How many? 14, 15 school year was when it was initially implemented here in our school district. When I first arrived, obviously things were very different. It was 2020. We were A day, B day, or A week, B week, all these things. But even in conversations with teachers then, when I was at Phyllis Wheatley, they would talk about how there was a need for a change with math, like they were wanting something new. So now fast forward to this position, started the first curriculum implementation that I did was at the secondary level with their math curriculum, which it was very similar to this process. So this was our second time around, learned a lot from the first one. Still used the committee and things, which is very similar to what I'll show you here. But basically, we started with some initial discussions when we decided that we wanted to start looking at options. We wanted to use Ed Reports, which is a nonprofit group that reviews curriculum and basically will tell you if it's considered a high quality instructional material or not. You can go on their website, select things from K to 12, all different types of things. But again, it's a nonprofit. They publish free reviews of materials using an educator-led approach to evaluate all of those things. And again, it's something that anyone can look up at any time. If you go back to Eureka, this is where this picture is from. So when you look at it, it met expectations. I forget what the gateways are necessarily for off the top of my head, but you can see that it wasn't green across the board. It was not meeting the expectation as far as being, fully like high quality material. It was partially meets in a certain area. So that was just for that. So Jenna White is my K-5 math specialist who helps me with all things math and their two schools. So the two of us started with just reviewing different curriculum, different ones that we knew of from around the state and other districts, and just in general looking at different things. So we reviewed 12 options total, from open up to illustrative, HMH, so on and so forth. Again, some of these are used in other districts or charters in the state. And as we were reviewing these, we did keep some notes, hopefully all my links work. So this was the initial document that Jenna and I were keeping all of our notes on. So we looked in, like, there were certain ones that we just didn't go in right off the top of our heads when we looked at them because they weren't greenlit in ed reports. They weren't, something we thought would be a good product for us. So we started looking into others. You can see we have pros and cons from each one as we went through. We reached out to teachers in other districts, other administrators in other districts, had notes on all of these different things. Just kind of so on and so forth. And, this is also kind of just an idea. So like Indian River uses bridges, Cape uses bridges, whereas Seaford, Laurel Lake use illustrative, Milford uses bridges, Appoquinimac's not on here, but they also use bridges. Cedar Rodney's illustrative math. So across the state, bridges and illustrative are like the two main ones that are used. You may hear illustrative called Imagine. That's one of the companies that offers it. So we did all of those reviews. And then our next step. At this point, one of the things with this, with the curriculum selection, it's not, I sit in my office and just kind of pick what I think is going to be best for our kids. For a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm not the expert necessarily. I've been out of the classroom for 14 years now, I think, or 13 years. It's been a while since I taught elementary math. But a big piece of it is creating buy-in with our educators. We need them to have some input in our decision-making process. Because ultimately, I've got to have people in both of these buildings or in all of our buildings that help with the selection process. It's not just me saying, here you go, this is what you're going to teach. I hope you enjoy it. And they had no input whatsoever. So I reached out to Mr. Sears and Mr. Huber back in, I want to say late October. And at that time, I told them that we were going to be looking into, not purchasing, looking into the possibility of a new math curriculum. Asked them both to send me some names of some teacher leaders in their buildings who were math teachers or math interventionists, who they thought would be good people for this work, level-headed, seeing both sides of it, what's best for teachers, what's best for kids, and would take the time to dig in, do a little extra work, maybe meet after hours, because it's hard to meet during the school day, obviously. And they sent me back a list of names, as you can see. So these were the people that they sent me, and all of them agreed to sit on this. So we had about the same amount of representation from both buildings, and then myself, Jenna White, and Ryan Pearl, who was still with us at the time, on the committee that would start looking into these new math curriculum. So again, they sent me those names. I sent out a survey at that point just to see if those folks were interested, and I also wanted to get some initial feedback from them. As far as obviously 100% of them wanted to be a part of the program or part of looking into it. I also asked them at that time to tell me what the 3 most important characteristics were that they would like to see in a new curriculum, which I won't go through all of those. And also if there were any additional comments, as you can see, sign me up ASAP. Thank you for the opportunity. So many kindergarten teachers have mentioned Splash Math, which was one we looked into. Didn't necessarily meet our needs, what we wanted. People were excited, things of that nature. So that survey went out, and from this point, scheduled our first meeting. It was on January 7th. And again, you can see it was after contractual hours. They agreed to meet with me from 4:15 to 5 o'clock. We did hold this meeting virtually, just because, I didn't want to keep them too late. And they both dismissed right around 4 o'clock. And by the time Zach's teachers left and went to ECEC or vice versa, then we would be starting at 4:30, so on and so forth. During that meeting, we reviewed several different things, why we're here, the fact that there's not a perfect curriculum. Like, I wanted to make sure that they understood there were going to be things that we didn't necessarily like about all of them and things that we would love about some of them. And that I was hopeful that we would make a transition. So again, there was no guarantee that we were doing anything. This was a fact-finding mission. I shared all the things that were important with them from the survey that I just shared. Which were several things, and then kind of talked about the process, how we were gonna look at different options, how we were gonna meet. Hoping to visit neighbor districts or at least talk to neighboring districts and have some questions and answers. Kind of what I needed from them as far as buying and being the people carrying the torch in the building, boots on the ground, kind of helping spread the message of where we're going and providing feedback. Talk about the different options that we were considering. We talked about whether things were in person, virtual, and that was pretty much it as far as the initial meeting went. At that point, I scheduled two. Jumping forward, sorry. So we decided that we wanted to take a closer look at Imagine Learning's illustrative math and bridges, the one that we ended up going with. HMH was one that was on the table. HMH is our secondary math curriculum that we use in the middle school and the high school. We talked about that as a group, and we decided not to move forward with looking at it simply because we couldn't go see it in person. With this curriculum, the teachers were very interested in going and seeing it and knowing that we had illustrative math in like I said, Lake Forest. We had bridges in Indian River and Cape that we could possibly go see it in person, watch the kids using it, talk with the teachers. So we decided that we would look into these two. So on February 28th, we had a sales representative from Imagine Learning. I believe you knew that gentleman, right? It was Mr. Kenton.
Yeah.
He was a former teacher in Lake Forest, I think. And you'll notice I put not a salesman. This stood out to me when we met with them. So the Imagine Learning is a big company. They show up with sales items, bags full of goodies and cakes and all these things that made, I could just see the look on the teacher's face. They're, oh wow, these bundt cakes are so good, and this and that, and he had all this stuff with him, right? We also had both of these curriculum materials set up in the room at ECEC where we were meeting with them. They sent them ahead of time and provided links to all our teachers so they could get in. Whereas Bridges is a nonprofit, and they sent someone who's actually a teacher, was a practitioner who taught the program. They didn't show up with all these bells and whistles trying to entice us to go a certain way based on all the fancy things they brought. So I made sure that we spoke to that, because you could definitely see the difference between the two presentations. So we wanted to take a closer look at those two. They were being used in several districts. And again, HMH was not, which I kind of already mentioned. So on March 20th, we were able to schedule a visit to Lake Forest. We went to their central and south elementary schools to observe. That is broken up similar to what we do, where they have a K3 building and a 4-5. So in the morning, I believe it was, I took teachers from Dane's school and 1 or 2 third grade teachers from Zach's school, and we went and observed Imagine Learning in Lake. And then on April 1st and 11th, it didn't work out to do the same day for Bridges, so we had to do 2 separate days. I scheduled visits to go to Georgetown Elementary in the Indian River School District. And again, with both of their teams, we went and observed in classrooms in both of those buildings, or all 3 of those buildings. So after that, in both of those situations, we went to, I would say, a minimum of 5 classrooms each in each building, and saw a lot of different things. And then we had opportunities at the end of our classroom visits to sit down with the school administration, district administration, and teachers. And our teachers had the opportunity to ask questions. Anything, you name it, they asked it about usability, about how kids like it, parents like it, tested, all kinds of questions. The funny part, I remember sitting in both of them, and when we left Indian River, there was a little bit more of this like speechless feeling. There wasn't as many questions. The teachers didn't have as many comments. And I honestly think it was because of what we saw. I don't want to say it left us speechless, but I know I didn't have as many questions. The engagement that we saw, the way the kids were doing math on the table with manipulatives and working collaboratively with others really like stood out to all of us. Like, it wasn't as much computer driven. There wasn't slideshows on screens and the kids were sitting here watching the teacher in the front of the room. They were actually doing math. That was the big part that stood out. So from there, we'll see which one of these works. I put all 4 of them on there just to see. So I had Ryan Pearl help me at times. I'm not the most technology savvy. Create this. This is called a Canvas slide. And what I did was I shared this. Let's see if this how much it's going to zoom in. Slide back and forth. So this is sent to all of our teachers that were on the committee. So basically, if you think about the computer world, this would be like us having a big poster on that side by the American flag that says pros, a cons, and then a questions, and we all just had post-it notes and we wrote our notes and we went and stuck them on there. But they can do it digitally. So shared this with everybody and gave them, I don't know, maybe a week to add any of their comments that they wanted. We did this directly after we went to Lake Forest, and you can see, try to zoom in on it without. So there's lots of different comments. Some teachers put their names, some didn't. And a lot of these comments were online slides. Lesson plans were easily accessible, teacher friendly, watching the teacher actually use digital slides. Appears to be a lot less copying. I did observe some excellent math vocabulary. Teacher notes were easy to follow. Notes were embedded within the slides. So you start seeing there's a lot of discussion on that side about slideshows and how it was easy for teachers to follow a slideshow. Okay. Then on the cons side, lack of options for interventions. Didn't see much different from the curriculum we're currently using. Discovery based, which is a different concept. One teacher shared the curriculum's not working for their special ed kids. No fluency for student engagement, very low student engagement. Small groups are not integrated. So when I look at these things, to me, it stood out that the cons were really more teacher or student related. That it was going to be a great thing for teachers, user friendly wise. Like I can come in the morning, I can type in lesson 1, whatever, pull up a slideshow, I can stand there and hit a button, and I can ask the essential question or the I can statement, and then I can just kind of move from one slide to the next, kind of like I'm doing today. Presentation, right? Not as much student engagement, getting down and dirty with the math, using manipulatives, working with friends, talking, all of these things. And then there was also a piece on the side, if it shows up, yeah. With just questions that they still had, and we organized those questions about the lack of engagement and so on and so forth. So that was our visit to Lake Forest. Another thing that really stood out for me with that one, out of all of the rooms that I observed in that day, there was really one room that stood out to me that was like, wow, this is not bad. The rest of them, there was disjointment to that. And one of the rooms that we went in was like the person, they said, this is the one you gotta go see. Like, this is the best room in this building. And I left with questions that I didn't like the answers I had in my head too. So anyway, I kind of had a feeling already at that point. But so then we went to Indian River to Georgetown Elementary. And we did the same process. We walked in and out of classrooms. But let me zoom in. And we did the same exact activity. Pros, cons, questions. What were the strengths that we saw? Heard great use of math vocabulary. I like number corner, great way to use math talk. I do like the interactive manipulatives. Student use of vocabulary is evident. Active learning manipulatives. Can't see that photo. Flows across grade levels, amazing vocabulary. Really impressed with the student engagement vocabulary. I also like the number corner focus not only on fluency, but also on basic skills that students are often lacking. Great student interaction, students who are student ownership of their learning, so on and so forth. And then when you look at the downside, it said number writing was lacking, lack of use of manipulatives, which was surprising when we looked at that because we see that a ton. The amount of upfront prep and organization, as well as the lack of slides. Concerned with the amount of space needed for supplies and anchor charts. Not sure how we would fit 60 minutes of core teaching and 20 minutes of number corner can fit. These fellows did a great job with their schedules and were able to fit those things in. Let's see, did not see activities that included 5 motor skills. Again, there's a lot of little pieces that are moved around. If you go and see this in our classroom, did not see the kids really moving around much. There would be some major redos for a master schedule. So again, when you look at the cons, here's another: teachers did not use slides to provide a larger presentation. There's a lot more on that side of what then again reflects on what the teachers have to do versus what the kids are actually doing. And we had a lot of conversation of like that comment itself about the viewing the larger presentation. There's pros and cons to that, like having it on the board so kids can look at it. But our fear from what we've seen in the past is that it just becomes a crutch. Like teachers will come in, like I said, at 8:30 in the morning. Some teachers, not all, and they'll pull up the presentation and they won't do any lesson internalization. The planning piece is missing. You can still have the lesson booklet. Shannon and I've had some conversations about this year. You can still have a lesson plan that's handed to you, but you still need to read it. You still need the lesson internalized, look at the lessons. You need to write down where you're going to do collaborative interaction pieces. And we were worried that with something with all the slideshows that would take away from that. And then again, there were just different questions, but we came away from it really thinking like, if you really think about what's best for our kids, not what is best for our teachers. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. Okay. We really felt that the student engagement, the vocabulary, the hands-on learning were the more important thing of the two. So we met, we talked about all of those things as a group in 2 different sessions. And here I go again. So ultimately, after our last meeting, you know, I told them, I said, look, I appreciate your input, all the time you put into this. Told them this from the start too, but ultimately I have to make the decision, right? Like it ends up coming down to what I think is best. And remind them again, it has to be what's best for students, not what is necessarily the easiest thing to teach, the easiest thing to implement. So we decided that, you know, when we sat around that room and looked at each other, everybody kind of gave the head nod. Some were more vocal than others, that they felt like Bridges was a good way to go. And I will say through the process, and these gentlemen could probably attest to it as well, you know, there were teachers who were posting on Facebook. Any of my friends in other districts use Bridges, feedback. And some people were, you know, it's very engaging, and a lot of the negative comments, if there were any, was just the amount of prep and the amount of planning that goes along with it. Which, you know, we all, many of us have been teachers, and that was just something that was a part of the job. Like we had to plan, we had to prep. We also, even when I went to Georgetown, you know, I know both curriculum directors in both districts, and I said, I want you to set us up with people who are going to tell us the truth. Don't sugarcoat anything. And when we sat in Georgetown's meeting, the assistant principal was formerly an elementary teacher, and the teachers in the room said, we love this program, but we will tell you the first 3 to 4 months is hard. It's really, really hard. There's a lot of materials, it's a lot of organization, but once you get accustomed to it and you get down pat, we think you'll really love what you see. So in the end, I had to make the final decision. You know, I looked at a lot of different things. I talked to tons of different people throughout the state and made the final decision that if we could make sure we had all the materials in the teacher's hands before August 1st. That was a big one for me. I did not want to try to do the heavy lift of a new implementation, and the teacher showed up on August, what was it, 20th or so, and they were missing things. That's not a good start, right? So we ordered everything, I met with the company, you know, got all the orders and stuff taken care of. And honestly, things showed up faster than we were ready for them to. I had to call David and Zach both and apologize, and custodians weren't prepared for the shipments, things of that nature. And it was quite a lot of materials. There were lots and lots of crates and boxes, but another piece of it too, you know, because I figured this may be a question is, you know, HMH, which we have in our secondary schools, does offer an elementary program. But again, it wasn't something we could go see. That was a big one for our teachers. They wanted to be able to go and see something. I reached out to my reps with HMH. And they couldn't even tell me anybody like in the Maryland, New Jersey area that we could possibly go to. Which would also be very hard to take that many teachers and travel that far away, but they do have a solid flow as far as a coherent progression. With the different prerequisite skills and things that they teach. And, you know, as they get into high school and things, it gets very different anyway with the different types of math, with algebra, geometry, so on and so forth. So the final steps, after we decided to go forward and we made the official announcement to teachers. I didn't want them leaving for the year in June with this, big question mark in their head of where we're going, right? I also didn't want them necessarily going out on their own and trying to learn a whole bunch of stuff that was not provided by the program itself or from the professional development team with Bridges. So they offer, there's a whole, their website, all of our teachers have access to a professional learning site. And they can go on and watch every month, like what the month entails, an overview of the unit, an overview of number corner and things. But it starts with a 90-minute self-guided training that they could go on. It was basically like their introduction to Bridges. And we made that a part of their checkout process at the elementary schools. So Zach and Dane both had that included in their last couple of days in June. Every teacher took it. They got their certificate for it. Materials began to arrive, like I said, in June, and there were a lot of them. You know, so many that it was very overwhelming at first. But Zach and Dane and their custodian staff and Jenna and myself and other teachers all kind of went in took us about a week, I think, to we inventoried every single box to make sure all of our pieces were there. And we had maybe 6 things that had to reach out, whether either damaged or didn't show up. And then we marked every box, you know, which are all the boxes, because they each got 3 to 4 boxes. Marked where they went. In some cases, you know, we would deliver them to the rooms on carts. In some cases, the custodians did. In some cases, Jenna did with the help of Nikki Bean and others. But we made sure that all those things were in the classrooms when the teachers showed up. One of my biggest pet peeves with the materials when they arrived is that the actual teacher manuals don't come assembled. They came, the binders and all of the dividers and all the plans, right, were separate. And as much as it pained me in my fingers and theirs and everybody else to go through and do that, I did not want teachers to walk in and they were like, they bought all these materials and now we have to assemble them. And I said, you know, I need to live it. I set a timer. Jen and I started doing some of them to see how long it would take to do a unit at a time and whatnot. And we put together, I can't remember how many we put together. We put together quite a few. But in the end, we decided to bring in some teacher leaders from both of their schools in every grade level, pay them to come in for a day. Just to set up the first, what we do, the first unit or two. I think the first couple of units, so that they could at least hit the ground running when the training started. And I also gave them half of that day to start unboxing materials and setting up their classroom as models for the other teachers as they came in. And then we offered another full day for all math teachers to come in. I paid them a day to start unboxing, just to try to help alleviate the stress of, I've got to come in on whatever day it was, August 20th, and I've got the half-day district breakfast, and I've got these trainings that I have to do, and all of the stuff, and let alone the unpacking of materials. So paid them to come in for that, which, you know, several teachers reached out and we're very thankful that we provided that for them. And then we had our first full day, 6-hour training in Dane's building on the 20th and Zach's building on the 21st. We had the trainer on site. Luckily for us, the trainer is actually the math specialist in Indian River School District. She's a certified trainer. They fly her around the country to do this stuff. So we had her here. We've been able to reach out to her several times with questions. She actually met with us, a few weeks ago? Just as like a check-in for about an hour to ask questions and things about stuff we're seeing. But both groups had their first full day of training then, and then Bridges also offers an intervention program, which we purchased as well to use in our B and C setting rooms for special education. And we also have one for each grade level, but basically I told them like, we need to just keep that off to the side for now. Let's learn the core curriculum this year. And then we'll worry about the intervention piece as we move forward. So we can bring them back for more training if needed next year. So in, it's a new beginning, there's, gonna be challenges, time. Anytime you implement a new curriculum, time seems to be the biggest problem. Like they had to really think outside the box to fit things into their day. The teachers' pacing's always, in any curriculum, I've seen the pacing piece of it, trying to fit everything in. So you'll see timers in our rooms at times. We've seen, and they can speak to this if they would like, but when we've gone, well, district office staff been in classrooms as well. Lots of student engagement. When you go in our classrooms, it's been very impressive. I don't know if I've been in a room maybe more than 2 or 3 times this year, and I've seen the teacher actually at the front of the room just by themselves talking about something. And in some cases, they're showing something and then a kid comes up and does it as well. But the engagement itself is great. I think I couldn't help myself. I didn't want to go in and bother anybody the first couple of days of school. But the first day that I did, I walked into a teacher's classroom in Mr. Huber's building. And I asked her how it was going, and she was working with a group of kids doing what they call workplaces, which are like math games that they do every day that focus on the skills. And she told me that now this is 5th grade, she told me that when she stopped them to go to recess, that they were upset, that they wanted to keep playing. Karen Laughlin, who is our secondary math coach, her daughter is in kindergarten. And she, obviously she's asked questions as a math person, and she says, "Oh, Logan comes home and she makes it sound like they don't even do math. She's just having so much fun in math class." So there's a piece to it where the kids don't realize even that they're learning while they're doing it. And you'll see if this video works on if we have sound or not, Marshall. Oh, this isn't the video. Hold on. But it's causing kids, and I don't know how all of you guys were, but I was fairly decent in math and I liked math, but there's a lot of kids that don't. And I think when you make it engaging and fun, it changes everything. And that's what this program has done. One more piece to it, just to kind of keep temperature checking. I sent a survey out before our 9/26 PD day back in September to see kind of how things were going. And I only had 17 responses. I'm not sure exactly how many math teachers we have, but it was a decent amount. Overall student experience, because that was my first question, because to me, it's about the kids. And in general, it was very positive, or mostly positive, these two. Neutral, some challenges, and there were no significant challenges. What strengths have you experienced? Just a few of them. I like how multiple skills are a small daily part of Number Corner. Multiple activities through the lesson, and students are more engaged. Workstations are very engaging. Number Corner is a good activating strategy. Everything needed is clearly stated in the beginning of the lesson, so on and so forth. So there was lots of good comments there. Struggle points, time to plan. Again, we knew that was going to be a thing. Not enough direct and explicit instruction, which goes back to the idea of standing in front of the board and just delivering constantly. So a lot of the comments that you would see if we read through all of these go back to the small group instruction and just the mindset of how things have looked for several years in a row. Where there's still small group pieces, it's just not quite the same. Prep time management, not 2 sets of things. In some cases, I have purchased a second set, like for Dane's kindergarten teachers, they felt like they needed a second set of something. And then I asked them if there were things that they would like for a focus if we did anything on the 26th. So my initial thought was giving them time. They just needed time for the planning and prep piece, and that's in the end what we ended up giving them. We did have an intervention training that day for the special ed teachers, but our regular A setting classroom teachers had the entire day to work with their colleagues and plan and prepare for the next unit. And then we asked about additional resources and things. Let's see. So.
Do you think a lot of that, Brendan, is they were used to the old math, the old curriculum, and then now it's all new, so.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's that, some of our teachers have been in the district 20 years, 25 years, and they've been here since 2014, right? They've been teaching that same curriculum for 12 years. So it becomes very secondhand. They know everything. They have done it the same way, but at some point there needs to be a change. You know,
So the time factor restraint that they're talking about, you think it'll eliminate a single one into this?
Yeah, I think it's the more we become familiar with the process, this prepping of materials, things, it will end up working itself out, yeah. And again, like with the timing piece in the classroom, you'll notice in some of their classrooms, you'll see a timer on the board. Because they've got it's easy as a teacher, in my opinion, because I was a teachable moments kind of person. I would be that guy that the principal had to say, you gotta learn how to cut it off, you need a timer. Because it's very easy to talk. You know, you have a kid, this kid has a question, this kid has a question. If you're in a kindergarten classroom, every kid's got a question. And it's like trying to rein them back in, right? So the timing piece, I think, will work itself out. You know, and I'm sure at the end of this year, they still have issues within the schedules. We will discuss how that can work. But in general, they have the time built in for the math curriculum. The teachers are getting better with it. Like the number corner piece you see in the one that looks like a calendar, that's 20-minute block time. They're supposed to do that for 20 minutes. Sometimes it takes 16. Sometimes it feels like they could go over, but we try to stick very closely to 20 minutes because as they go through the month, all of these things spiral. Like when you look at that picture, they will not only talk about like the first day has a yellow triangle on it, they're going to talk about the pattern. This program is very big on patterns. So when you look at that, the teachers, when you're in the classrooms, they'll say, well, what patterns do you see? So if you're looking at that right now, what's a pattern that jumps out to you? Right? Like you see yellow, purple, red, yellow. Purple, red, yellow, purple, red, yellow, and that continues. Or you might see where it's a certain number of corners or a certain number of vertices, things of that nature. But the number corner piece is, I think, one that most teachers tell me they really enjoy the most. Yeah. In a lot of classrooms, when they do number corner, you'll see the teachers bring the kids to the carpet, sitting in a circle or up closer to the board. They'll have real life materials too. They bring it from home. They talk about all those things. But so I go too much over my time, but this is a brief video from the company. Let's see if we have sound that I was going to show you. Marshall, do you know if we have sound on this machine? If not, we can skip it. I don't want to waste too much. No sound on that. That's not. Alright, well. This video is basically a 2-minute video that shows different classrooms. Actually, a couple of the teachers on this video are in Cape and Logan School District. You'll notice I think the next gentleman has the Viking on his shirt. But they basically talk about their experiences with Bridges so far. But that's on the website. You can see that. But these are just other pictures that are posted on here. This is Mr. Barnes, 5th grade, sitting working with kids. This was an activity. So this is one of the workplace activities. I actually saw this in Mr. Hudson's room in 1st grade at ECEC last week doing learning walks. The kids are learning about money and coins. This was pennies and nickels. They learn the workplace game with the teacher first. So in this case, Mr. Hudson was actually playing against the students. And there's a lot of spinners and a lot of things to the program. So they would spin, and basically they're trying to see who can fill in their, I think it was 40 cents or something like that first. So they spin and they color them in, and then they get to a point where, you know, they may only have 3 pennies left to fill in, and they spin a nickel. So then they talk about, well, why can't I fill in the 3 pennies? Because I have 5 cents, not 3 cents. And when I walked out of that room that day, Mr. Hudson, if you know him, is very lively and very engaging with kids. He asked a question as I was walking out. He said, well, if I have, if we're talking about the pennies and nickels, he made a comment, something to the effect of, well, if I have 5 nickels, or if I have 6 nickels, how many cents do I have? And this kid, 30 cents. And I was like, wow, like in a 1st grade classroom in October, that was pretty impressive. So I don't know if you guys have anything you would like to share. That's, I mean, that's my last slide as far as what you've had so far.
I think the number corner is like well loved by all the teachers. I think it's everybody's favorite part. It's the students' favorite part of the day. Sometimes it's the calendar. It's kind of like a morning meeting. There's so many different math concepts crammed into one 20-minute period, and so many things that the kids are talking about, and it just keeps coming back around and reinforcing it time after time after time. The issue of teachers not having enough time to prep or prepare for things, like we've been very intentional about planning time and about using time. This is our first time through the curriculum. The videos that they have on their website for the teachers prior to the month or prior to the unit are about 8 minutes long, and they're super helpful. They kind of explain the why and why they're teaching things the way that they're teaching and what it's working towards. And it also tells them when it will come up again. And we found the videos very beneficial for the teachers to watch. We've made time during PLC for them to watch those videos and incorporate that into the time that we have them, so they don't have to necessarily watch it on their own time. Time during PD days has been very intentional to give them time to work on bridges and prep and get ready for the next month. Some of the little nuances of the program that I think, like, the curriculum really looked at every single aspect. Like when you look, normal curriculum or curricula don't plan that November is a month where there's very little school. In this curriculum, there's 15 instructional days. And in our November, we have 15 instructional days. So there's not anything that teachers have to decide, what do we need to cut out? Or what do we need to, same with December. There's only 15 in the like the monthly calendar thing. There's only 15 days. They still will show the kids all 30 days of patterns and things like that, and they'll talk about them. But there's only 15 days of like plans in there for them to go through with them. So it's not a bunch of stuff that you have to decide, like, what are you going to cut? And the one thing that stuck out to me when we met with our trainer at the beginning of the year was she told the teachers, you're going to feel like, that lesson could have gone better, or maybe I should go back and reteach that. And she said, I'm going to tell you, it comes back up. Move on, go to the next lesson. It'll come back up. Unless it's a standard that is the kids have to be proficient in it in that lesson, then you're good to keep moving on. It'll come back on. A lot of the standards they don't have to be proficient on until they get to units 6, 7, and 8, and the assessment booklet tells them that. So that's a couple of little nuggets from our school.
The only other piece I'd add to, like, it's been the transition for us and with Jenna and things have been nice because there is so much support around the state. We have, with the program, we meet, I think it's 6 times a year with a group of other first year implementation folks from all over the country, and they would a couple people overseas. We just had one Thursday, right?
Yeah,
last week
Thursday.
we had one where we talked with each other about strategies and things and struggles that we're having. Jenna also attends monthly meetings with other math coaches from around the state who are using bridges. Again, we have a lot of lifelines between Indian River and Cape when we have questions. So all in all, I think it's going very well. I mean, there's always pockets. There's a few people that just don't like it. You're gonna have that with anything. So when you walk in and out of our classrooms and you see the classrooms, you see the student engagement, you can see the teachers who are buying into what we're doing with it. It's really impressive. And I would recommend that any of you reach out to these fellows and walk in and check it out. Okay, so questions?
And what's the disconnect with the grades?
So with grading, it was really more at Zach's building. One of the things that came up in was it PLCs?
Yeah.
So he asked about I'll call them concerns versus complaints or things. There were, what we noticed or what they noticed in their building were there were kids who had traditionally been straight A 98 kind of kids who were getting a 7s, 80s, things of that nature. There were a lot of different things that were discussed as far as what could be causing that. One was like the assessments themselves, the program says should take about 50 minutes, 40 to 50 minutes. Teachers were having kids that weren't finishing in time. They would have maybe 4 kids in their whole class finish in 60 minutes. So then we talked about that first, and what's causing that? Is that they're just not doing anything, and there's no real like push, and you have to get this done, right? So we talked about that and strategies that teachers could use when they circulate the room, and maybe they're marking kids' answers correct if they are, as they walk by, to kind of help promote them getting finished. Then there was the idea that, you know, there's gaps. It's a new program. There's new terminology, like number racks is a big one that they're not used to, which is kind of like an old school abacus where you slide the beads back and forth. Where they used to use number bonds. So there's gaps with the terminology sometimes that have caused some of that. So we met as a group and discussed, you know, are there any changes we could do to try to alleviate some of these concerns? And we opted to reach out to our coach, our trainer from Indian River, and they went through a very similar thing. So the decision we went with was to go in and adjust the rubrics for the first marking period, to adjust the scores a little bit. Because it wasn't that the students weren't showing effort, it was that they were just kind of struggling with some of the concepts. And I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I'll just give you an example, like, so our 5th grade crew, they had it the worst because this curriculum is designed to think that they've done programs since kindergarten. So what they were being assessed on were a lot of terms, a lot of key concepts that they might have gotten that exposure through Eureka, but not the way it does through Brandon's. And so, you know, during our PLCs, our teachers do a lot of work with lesson internalization, but I think it was a big learning experience for us, not only as admin, but for teachers to really dive into what those rubrics look like and what they're asking for as well. And so that's something that, you know, we talked with Snyder and Jenna and our bridges coach about, like, what we can do moving forward to kind of alleviate that. And so that's, you know, kind of how we approached it. And like Snyder said, you know, it would allow Dawn and I an opportunity to kind of do a temp check of what was going on. And when we met with them for PLCs a few weeks ago, we saw a lot of the same trends, right? And so we just kind of typed in a Google document, like, look, this is what we're experiencing school wide. And then that kind of prompted the meeting with our bridges trainer. We came up with solutions. At the next PLC, Dawn and I presented these solutions to our team, but we did make it very clear that what is decided has to be consistent for all students. And so that was kind of the message we pushed out.
And then he doesn't have the issues at the K to 2 level. I spoke with one of my specialists who has a child in both of their buildings, and she made a comment about the 4th grader and the struggles, but the 1st grader is thriving, like, with the differences with it. So we're hopeful that, you know, by making that adjustment and with time, those gaps will kind of fill in, but that was the main issue with it.
But it seems with all that engaged, the exact opposite should happen. Like, everybody's test scores should be going up.
Yeah.
So are we happy with the high school curriculum? Or are we looking at?
Yeah, I mean, to my knowledge, we're good there. I mean, this is year 3. The biggest thing I know we've talked about this, the biggest thing that we're trying to push this year is that the HMH curriculum. The reason, so I don't want to go too far over time, but the reason that there was big difference, but one big difference between this implementation and the selection and the other. Still had teacher input, all those things, but we weren't able to go see it in person, right? And that was one of the things that I really wanted to try to do this time, just learning myself. But when we were looking at the 2 curriculum for the secondary schools, it was Carnegie Math and HMH. Carnegie Math is being used in Indian River. We went and met with their math specialist. I talked to several teachers, our teachers were talking to other teachers. And one of the big things that stood out to me with the Carnegie system was that a lot of the comments I was hearing was talking about how it wasn't helping our lowest learners. It wasn't helping, you know, or there wasn't enough intervention types of things. I had a couple teachers tell me that, you know, they were like district teacher of your types, and they were talking about how hard it was for them to learn it, but it's made them a better math teacher. But they talked about struggles that they would have if you had, you know, an ARTC type of teacher coming in, or a 1st-year teacher. And the HMH curriculum offered like tiered interventions and things for small groups The problem we've had is getting the small group implementation up and running at the secondary level, which Shan's aware, we talked about our math coaches and, math coach and math specialists are working on that. That's been a part of our CSI work there, trying to figure that out. But in general, at this point in time, from what I've heard from them and our teachers, it's better than what we had. They like where we're going with it. But we haven't really thought about changing it.
So Brandon, as we end this, just one comment and one question briefly. One comment is that when we do our walkthrough, we've been in the buildings multiple times this year, the engagement is there than previous years. That's, we've seen that. So good job for our instructors. Second question, back to the presentation about choosing curriculum. This process is what we do for ELA as well, for other curriculum, kind of get back to the beginning, like this is what we do. I mean, it's not someone in isolation making a decision.
Yeah.
This is the process we involve all stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, this is, coming from being in a building for 10 years and then stepping into this and this is part of the job the first time around. The first time around, it was a learning curve, it was an experience, right? And I reflect on things often, and again, that big piece that I would have liked to do more of was taking teachers and seeing it. Did still got input, still did all the surveys, we had the materials, the teachers got to see it, look at it, do all those things. But yes, in my general opinion, when it comes to purchasing a curriculum, implementing a curriculum, the teacher buy-in is enormous. I would never sit in a room and pick something because I thought it was the best thing by myself. I just wouldn't. I gotta have input from the people who are gonna be using it, boots on the ground. Again, there are some things that are driven directly from the state, like our open science curriculums, the science curriculum at middle school. That's what we use because that's what we use with them. It's not that we select different things. But when it comes to reading and math, the state's biggest thing is they want to be what they consider HQI, high quality instructional materials. They have lists of things that they have on their websites or things that they will talk to us about. Bridges being one of them, bookworms being one of them, HMH, illustrative, they push. Illustrative, the state really pushed hard for a while. But one of my colleagues that I used to work with, who has worked in a district that used Bridges and illustrative, I called him directly and I said, which one did you like better? He said that he'd go back to Bridges in a heartbeat, So yeah, it's never in a silo, be making a decision. It's a lot of stress. It's stressful as it is, but,
So to build off that, Brandon, there was like five teachers staff from each building.
Mhm.
Do you think incorporating, the more opinions you get, the more confliction you get. But going to the secondary schools and, what are we missing here when we're picking a new curriculum, to come to 5 intervention specialists at middle school, high school. Hey, our kids finally got to high school, but they were missing this aspect. We need to focus on that in younger years. I was never a fan of Eureka Math, having kids that went through it. It was a nightmare. Parents' involvement. I've had a parent that has a kid in 7th grade and has one in 2nd grade, and they love this new program because it's interaction. And their quote was, "It's common sense math. It's teaching my kid about real life math." And I think that's an aspect that in the past that we've kind of missed, and they get to that secondary level and, X plus Y and plus Z is, great math, but they've missed that common sense of, it's 60 cents when, you add 2/4 of a dime.
Right.
So I didn't know whether, have you ever considered bringing kids in for their input or
I never did.
or parents?
I have not had parents involved now, but it's a good point. In the
What your kid is missing, or as a senior, this is what I feel like I should have gotten when I was in elementary. Not a whole herd of them, but.
right. No, it makes sense.
I know that Brandon has done that at the middle school though, like when we were looking at some social studies, he worked with the company to allow us to utilize it for a couple months free of charge, and the teachers to get feedback from the kids that was used before they.
Yes, I can't remember.
Yeah. And they've done pilot stuff at the middle school too, and that.
You said that this curriculum had been in for 14 years. That just seems way too long, outdated.
Yeah, I mean,
What would you say should be the length of a curriculum
I
and
think it's, I don't wanna put a number on it, I think it's something. That should probably, like, so with anything, you purchase a contract, things of that nature, I think every time you get to the end of that contract, there should be some discussion, but. I would say at a minimum, every 5 years, you should probably be looking at it and having just some real deal conversations about it. One of the things with bridges that kind of also stood out to us is Indian River next door, that they're better or whatever. This is their 12th year. This is their 11th or 12th year with this program. They're in the 3rd edition, which is what we purchased. And I don't think they would have continued to go back to it if it wasn't doing something good. But I do think you should be looking at it probably every 5 to 6 years. There's the aspect of the financial piece and the aspect of whether it's time just for a change in general. Because all of these things have layers and when you're purchasing, you gotta be thinking about, okay, well, if I purchase this now for this many years with this amount, but then this one's gonna be purchased again, you can't have them all coming up at one time. Is the other piece of it. But yeah, 14 years seems like a long time.
Well, he answered, because one of my questions was, how long has Indian River been using it and how has it impacted their scores? So you just said, so that says something. My concern is, since we have a different curriculum at the secondary level and now we have this new one at the elementary level, how seamless will it be for those students to be able to adapt to a different mindset? Because each curriculum brings a different mindset, which is what your students were struggling with in the 5th grade, because they had the mindset K through 4th of that prior curriculum. So, my main concern is that how is that going to flow at the secondary level? And another concern is, like you said, we should be 5 years. Let's just make sure that we are on it so that we can, like you just did, problem solved, why our grades matching, that we're able to do that sooner. So those are my concern, but also you answered my question. So I agree, we should be looking at things every 5 years, reflecting on it. And I really am glad that, yes, even though it is uncomfortable for teachers, student engagement is the #1 thing, and that's what we want for our students.
And that's continued, I mean, that's been a struggle point through this year, with some of the teachers. There's so many things available when you just type it into the computer anymore, like, they were finding stuff. They were finding,
Choked up.
they were finding slideshows and things, in Facebook groups about bridges. And they would continue to ask, why can't we do this? Why can't we do this? And we just had to, there's a line, and we're not doing it. One of the comments that our trainer says over and over, that bridges wanted you to have it, you have it. And they don't provide slides. And there's a reason, because the math happens out here, not up there. So we've really kind of towed the line with that and said, we're not doing that. If you wanna, by all means, if you want to, you'll go in different rooms. So like, if this piece of paper was that workplace game that I showed you with the pennies, there's a digital copy that you can pull up. But there's also a lot of teachers that will use the document cameras in their classrooms, and they'll slide the actual page under it, and they can do the same thing. They don't need a slideshow that's 15 slides long, and they can click through it. So, that's been a struggle point, some of those things, but we've stayed steady in our approach, and, we're keeping the main thing with how we want to do it. We've been going well.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Brandon. Very much.
Thank you.
We're gonna move into the
Sorry,
voting presentation. Sorry, a little off track, but Dane's gonna get us back on track here.
Yeah.
Building presentation.
So they is. Be careful, she's slipping. Quick.
All right, so our strategic plan, the document version of our strategic plan looks something like this. Each year, our school improvement team meets, we review the strategic plan and the goals, we align it with the mission and vision and the core values of our school district. That you all approved. And then we come up with goals as a team that we meet on, that we share with the entire school at the beginning of the year. These are goals that everyone has shared. They're goals that teachers have for their DTGSS improvement goal, and they're also goals that Adam and I have as our building goals, as our part of our improvement goals for our evaluation as well. I think one of the big things is I wouldn't ask teachers to do anything or have a goal for students that I wouldn't have for myself, or that we don't have shared as a school. So the first, so if we scroll down through, you'll see the first goal here is academic. I'll get more in depth on this. The second goal is attendance. Goal 3 is relationships, with positive postcards and things like that we send home to create relationships with families. And then the last goal 4 is our DTGSS collaborative growth plan goal for staff. This is a big one for our SIT team because this is one of our focuses for the staff when we meet each month. This is one of the focuses that we always come back to, and helping our staff achieve this goal. It's a part of their DTGSS collaborative growth plan as a building. So it ties into their instruction every day. The implementation plan is listed here at the bottom. And I'll go through some of this in the slides, but there's links. The staff has access to this. Our SID team uses it quite often during meetings, and we can click right into the data that we need to look at for like MTSS data, different things like that, for our evidence. So that's what the document looks like. So there's 4 goals, as I said. Dibbles and IXL will start with first. These are the growth goals that teachers select, and for teachers to meet the growth goal, they're looking for 50 to 64% of their students to increase their Dibble scores in each of the following areas: correct letter sounds, oral reading fluency, correct letter sounds for kindergarten and oral reading fluency for first and second. This is an adjustment this year. So we'll talk about reading. We've always done oral reading fluency in 2nd grade. Our goal as a school is to develop more fluent readers. That is the focus of a lot of our professional development. A lot of what we're doing in the classroom through bookworms is on building fluent readers. So with the 2nd grade level, at the end of last year, grade 1, so that those are our current 2nd graders, had on the Dibbles fluency score, we're looking at just below half of the students in the blue to green area.
Hey, I don't want
Yep.
I don't mean to interrupt you, just a brief, what is Dibbles? What is that?
All right.
Just a brief update. on
Yep.
that.
So Dibbles is the dynamic indicator of early learning survey, right? Or early literacy. It is comprised of different tests at different levels. So in kindergarten, we're looking at if the kids know and recognize their letters and their letter sounds, and they're able to produce them when we flash a letter. So we flash a letter to them, they can tell us what the letter is, and they can tell us the sound that it makes. As we do a beginning of the year assessment, we get a baseline for the students so we know where they're starting, so that we can figure out where their gaps are and where they need help. It also will eventually help us to choose what sort of interventions they receive during our differentiated instruction time. So that at starting in 1st grade, they start to get into oral reading fluency. So once all of the skills, phoneme segmentation, if you've ever read anything about the science of reading, it's letter sounds, it's phoneme segmentation, and then they start to take those set letter sounds and apply them to nonsense words. So words that absolutely mean nothing, like dob, D-O-B. The kids look at the sounds, they segment them to b, and then put them together to say dob. We do that so that they know that, we know that they're actually building the phonics in there and not just rote memorization on the word, right? If we gave them real words like way or dab or different things like that, some of those could be memorized. So we're looking to see that they're actually building that phonemic awareness and building towards being fluent readers. The middle of the year in first grade is when they start to assess students on oral reading fluency, and we start to get some original numbers to kind of gauge where students are. And then second grade is heavy on oral reading fluency. It's one of the main tests that they take. And then that continues on in third through fifth grade. So Zach will talk about that as well. So in the past, where you can see at the beginning of last year, end of last year, our first graders were sitting close to half for oral reading fluency score of them meeting the benchmark. We're looking for this green to blue area usually on these little rainbows that you'll see here. Then for the 25-26 beginning of the school year, apparently some kids read over the summer and we're really practicing their reading because we're sitting the progression that they start with in first grade is actually a higher progression than what they were expected at the end of first grade, where they start in the second grade. So the average beginning of the year oral reading fluency for second grade this year, the beginning was 51.1 words. The beginning of the year benchmark was 52. So that's why you see this kind of in the middle area here. Our end of the year benchmark that we're trying to work towards is 87. So you'll see that the thing with Dibbles is the benchmarks that the kids are trying to attain at the beginning, the middle, and the end move with them. So they're not assessing where they should be at the end of the year, at the beginning of the year. They're assessing where they really are at the beginning of the year, where they are in the middle of the year, and where they are at the end of the year in relation to the end of the year.
So by that chart, so this year, you had more children come in who couldn't read at all.
No.
Didn't know.
No, we have more students here that were fluent readers or that were really close to the benchmark at the
But your
beginning
red
of
is,
the year.
but I mean, your red is getting bigger.
For sure. So the number did increase. So the struggling readers are gonna struggle more because at the end of the year, I think the benchmark was like 43. And then the beginning of the year benchmark is 52. We'll get down to the end of the year is 47 and then 52. So even over the summer, the expectation of Dibble's testing is that the kids gained 5 words of fluency, even though they didn't really have any instruction over the summer. So it is typical to see that red grow from the end of the year to the beginning of the year. And then our goal is to close and have less red and more yellow, less yellow, more green and more blue.
So should we be looking at something to, I know it's where we get them, but
So
those kids who are coming, like, is there anything we can do? This is where we can.
because of our MTSS process, a lot of the students that you see in the red area are receiving interventions in the classroom to get them to where they need to. They're receiving instruction during differentiated instruction time on whatever specific skills they are lacking in. We give an informal decoding inventory at the beginning of the year to place them into small groups within the classroom. And students that are tier 3, for the MTSS process are receiving interventions with our reading interventionists, the 2 reading interventionists in the building.
I think the question, I don't want to speak for you, I think is that what kindergartners coming in lower and lower is really the kind of narrative that we've been hearing and seeing. So what is, or what could be done, or what are we doing to help those readers? I know off the top of my head, the Kindergarten Head Start program that we do in the summer is a great program. The problem is that you need some parental involvement before they even enroll. You know, that's a big piece.
The kids that are coming, do you know where they're coming from? Like, have they been in childcare centers? Are they with stay-at-home parents? Are they, like, do you know what their situation is? Cause I could tell you all those kids in the blue have all had, they have active parents, they've been in.
Some of them have been in our own pre-K program, right? As typical kiddos in our own pre-K program.
That are in the red?
No, that
Oh,
are in the
okay,
blue.
cause we got some work to do then. if
No.
that's-
There,
So those kids, well, I guess, and this is not the point of the story today, but if we can do something in those
So-
first few years,
I will cover some action steps and some things that we've met with Brandon on and that we're talking about.
Here in the blue and the green, like we could be tearing it up,
That'd be
right?
great.
I mean, and that's where we need to, sorry.
Once we get them into the blue and the green, we can work on comprehension at that point, right? But we have to have them fluent before we can work on comprehension.
And if we get that done before they come to you, then we can really see tremendous changes.
Absolutely. So I will not tarry here long, because I'll get to the action steps that I know you want here. So our first grade reading, the end of the year, grade K. They knew all their letter sounds. I mean, you're seeing, this is what we were looking for at the end of the year last year. And this is the students at the end of the year last year delivered in kindergarten. They, had less red, less yellow, more green and more blue. And transitioning into first grade, I told you that the expectations that are on the end of kindergarten test are way different than what we give them for the beginning of first grade, because we're getting into this idea of oral reading fluency and being able to read more fluently. So oral reading fluency isn't really assessed until the middle of the year. But one of the changes that we made, we used to use nonsense word fluency as our building goal and teacher goals. And after meeting with our MTSS team last year and looking at our MTSS data and really digging deep on what we were doing and how we can figure out the best indicators of students that are struggling and that may not be getting it, was to really look at what we really need to be using the oral reading fluency as our gauge. So we did administer oral reading fluency for all of our first graders at the beginning of the year as a separate little subtest to figure out where they were. So that we weren't waiting until the middle of the year to figure out where they were. So with this being our composite score, we looked at the oral reading fluency score. The average score for first graders at the beginning of the year this year was around 20, between 20 and 21. The middle of the year benchmark that they're shooting for is 23. So our hope is that knowing that where this number is and knowing which students were struggling with this, with our DI block in our differentiated instruction block in bookworms, that we're able to get these kiddos to the middle of the year benchmark. Now, we still are planning on rolling out the Reading Graders program that we did last year, again this year with our first and second graders that are in that red and yellow. And really, when we look at that, we're looking at that yellow piece are those fence sitters. Those are the kids that are really close to that blue and green and are the easiest to move over to blue and green. And then, you know, we can look at what's going on with that sliver, the larger sliver of red kiddos. But this is a beginning of the year assessment. So we're hoping to see growth with that.
The reading program, I mean, it's a great program. You can go by there, see a ton of cars, go in there, see a ton of kids. Is it targeting? Does it get the kids that really need to be there? Or I know that's a lot of parent intervention, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. We were very intentional about that program and actually Rita came and saw some of the training that we did. We used a specific program called UFly, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And we're very intentional in the students we chose. We wanted the students that were coming to school every single day and were still struggling in the classroom. We wanted students that were giving their all in the classroom. The teachers were saying they're really struggling. Like, it's not because they're not trying. There's just a disconnect, and that's where we have our high quality tier 1 instructional materials like bookworms. But what can we give them that'll present it maybe in a different way, that'll provide an additional way for students to see it? And so we went out and looked for a program that we were actually currently we're using as a tier 3 intervention program called UFly. And so we started presenting to those kids after school with a different, we weren't just gonna keep throwing the same stuff at them that may not have been working. We're looking at a different lens and showing them a different program, exposing them to a different way to learn phonics and oral reading fluency. So kindergarten, we know right now, our beginning of the year composite score last year for K was here. Here's where we were this year. So we have a couple more that are readers or are starting to trend that way. But you can see the numbers for last year and this year are very similar. And this is where last year's kiddos got at the end of the year. So this is normal for the beginning of the year, and this is our hope as we start to teach them phonics and provide that direct instruction to where we can get. But we also saw a disconnect. We used phoneme seg fluency last year. We changed that goal this year to be correct letter sounds, because after talking with or our reading interventionists and our MTSS team meeting and talking with some of the science of reading folks across the state and PDs they've been going to, we felt like correct letter sounds was a better indicator of students being successful in reading. So collecting that information at the beginning of the year so that we have it and we're able to use that to help to guide instruction was very intentional this year. So for math, lot less graphics here, but for IXL last year, we had a different, through IXL, they had a different test that they administer with the students through their program. It was not super successful. Student scores fluctuated a lot. It was hard for teachers to kind of gauge where students were. IXL came out this year and said, essentially, yeah, that wasn't the best. We're transitioning back to the diagnostic that we used before, but we're calling it the flex diagnostic. So it is a different test than what they used last year. Looking at kids this year, the beginning of the year, you're looking at like 60 to 70% in the on and above grade level. But we really have been focusing on these beginning of the year averages and where students should be. IXL says they should be at 200 to start second grade, 100 to start first grade, and 0 to 50 to start kindergarten. So our students are right there for the diagnostic assessment. The average of kindergarten was 50, 110 at first grade, and 200 at second grade. And our benchmarks we're trying to get them to is 300. IXL says they should grow about 10 points a month, which would be a 70-point growth. So we set our growth scores at 70 points. But if we have students that start at a higher than 200, it's harder for them to attain 70 points of growth in the year. So for them, they can either gain 70 points or meet the end of grade level benchmark of 300 in second grade, 200 in first grade, and 100 in kindergarten. So we really are kind of pushing the envelope. We do student goal setting around these. The kids can see their levels on the computer when they sign in. They get about 50 minutes every 2 weeks of instruction on IXL, because we really are making a concerted effort to ensure a lot of their instruction's happening with the new Bridges curriculum. We're not putting as much of an emphasis on the IXL. It is a good program for some of our higher students to work on because it'll meet them at their level. But we're also working on how to challenge them in some of the Bridges workplace activities. There's challenge aspects or different ways that they can play the game. If it's an addition game, it can be modified to be a subtraction game for a kid that's working above level. So attendance, our goal is 90% or higher. Last year we were at 98.2. Our goal is always to get at this benchmark of 90 or higher. That is the state level for our accountability rating. For goal 3 and goal 4, we have teachers sending home an average of 2 positive blue postcards per student in classes, an average of 2 positive office referrals each month. Kind of like a student of the month type program, We nominate 2 students, we bring them to the auditorium at the end of the month, we present them with a certificate, they get a pencil. And we take their picture, we've been sending that into the Seaford Star, so hopefully you've seen that in there. So we can kind of get those star raters out and about. We also have some super rater signs that we've sent out and put out in the community, so hopefully you see some of those out in front of houses for some of our star students. And then our last goal I told you was the collaborative growth goal. And that ties into all of the teachers' DTGSS evaluations. We talk about this at every single debrief. What things they're doing in their classroom to help advance academic language and vocabulary. And we've even done professional development this year surrounding that. Our SID team organized that for the last PD day that we had. So our general school-wide action steps as we look at those goals are to give our students access to high-quality tier 1 instruction and curricula, provide professional development like I was telling you. We had our initial PD for bridges, reading, we had bookworms PD. This was something that administration did last year with bookworms, with our bookworms coach. We had very intentional PD during the day where we would receive PD from our bookworms coach for about an hour, like in my office, and then we would go out into classrooms and watch the lessons in action. And she helped us come up with better bangs for our buck on oral reading fluency. Knowing that our goal is fluency and developing fluent readers by the time they get to 3rd grade, she focused a lot on some things that we could be focusing on during observations and things like that, walkthroughs in the room, to help students and teachers with focusing on fluency. So she came and provided, Tammy Steele's her name, she provided coaching. She's provided coaching so far this year, one time with actionable feedback for students or for teachers, glows and grows. And she also did a PD on the September the 26th professional development, just kind of going back over some of the whys and why Bookworms does some of the things they do and the intention behind things in the curriculum. That was super helpful for teachers because we're at year 5 or 6, year 6 of implementation of Bookworms. So some of our staff has turned over. We have new folks that are on board, and she was able to kind of shed some light on and reinvigorate teachers on that. We obviously analyzed data during all of our MTSS data meetings and the different benchmarks throughout the year we collect the data. There's admin, specialists, interventionists, MLL teachers, counselors, psychologists, and special education coordinators at the MTSS meetings, all providing input and helping to make decisions for individual students and grade levels. Data shared with the MTSS team is used to see if there's current practices that may need to be adjusted or changed. We shared end of cycle data with staff in an email. That's just an example of something Adam shared with the staff about our MTSS supports, and 80%, 88% of student body is currently responding successfully to tier 1 core instruction in reading and math. 9 students successfully exited tier 2 support and returned to tier 1. That's our goal. And then the cycle movement, how many students transitioned from 2 to 1, 3 to 2, and you can kind of see all of this data that we share with the teachers, not only to capitalize on some of the highlights, but also to talk about like where we see trends in the data, and then the total number of students at each tier. At the last meeting, we had 17 pre-referral packets that were sent out on behalf of the spec ed department, and working on permission to evaluate. So that our school improvement team looks at the same data as well as some of our data from peer observations and administrative walkthroughs, non-evaluative walkthroughs in the classroom. We look at all of that data and we put it side by side and we put it all together. So We can see what teachers are seeing when they go into each other's classrooms, because they use a similar walkthrough tool that we use as administrators when we go in. They provide grows and glows and we provide feedback. But the questions that are asked are exactly the same, so that we can kind of match the data and see where we align and make sure that what teachers are seeing in each other's classrooms is the same as what we are seeing in each other's classrooms. Specific action steps by goal, which is what you were talking about earlier, Ms. Evermail. So looking at data, we adjusted to collect data that more closely aligned with increasing fluency. That included correct letter sounds in kindergarten or reading fluency now in first grade. And one of the biggest things that we made the decision in seeing the success we had in the youth lab program, which we presented about to the State Board of Education, Mr. Snyder and Ms. Bean, myself, Adam, we all met and talked about how we could utilize that curriculum to best meet our students' needs sooner. So this year, in kindergarten, we have, so our bookworms curriculum provides the students with a marking period where they don't do DI instruction. So there's 9 weeks without DI instruction in kindergarten, and we look to capitalize on that time. So we took the instructional block there and we said, what if we implemented UFly, the program that we use for the after school reading program? Would we be able to implement it? The problem was that it takes more than 9 weeks. So we did make a decision to not start bookworms DI until after we come back from Christmas break, to allow us to run a whole group UFly lessons in every kindergarten classroom with support from paras and our reading interventionists in all of the kindergarten classrooms from the start of school until the last day, well, the day before the last day in December. So our hope in getting through, I think it was total of 42 lessons UFly with these students, is that they will start in different intervention groups than we're used to them starting for bookworms, and we're giving them a jump start on their letter recognition, their sound recognition. And if you have an opportunity to come in, I welcome you to come in. I can give you times of the day. You can see the UFly in action in the kindergarten classrooms. There's a lot of slides that teachers and Nikki have put together for them to really engage in whole class. They have little letter boards that they have magnetic letters in front of them. They can move it around. They're building words with the letters and sounding and blending them. And we're super excited to hopefully see a difference by adding that additional resource into the curriculum. So that's one of the biggest things here that we've added. As far as attendance, we review our own notes. We do attendance awards at marking period assemblies. We also give nearly perfect attendance because some parents struggle if their kid has to miss a day, but we know that kids get sick, especially kindergartners, the first time they're exposed to all these germs. Postcards, we're looking and we're on trend to continue to send out plenty of postcards and recognize students that are doing what they're supposed to be doing in the classroom and really kind of focus on the positives. So that's our first contact with parents and not when there's an issue. We had curriculum night to introduce parents to our new Bridges curriculum. We had over 70 families attend. We shared data with our staff during staff meetings, during the grade review. And then the last thing was that goal for PTGSS walkthroughs. We also do non-evaluative walkthroughs for each teacher 2 times a month, and teachers are completing 2 peer observations with a focus on academic language and vocabulary and engagement. We always have them review each other on engagement, and we share that data at staff meetings. So 30 minutes. Thank you. Done.
Any questions? How about we take a 5-minute break? Okay, 5 minute break. The video will be off, but the sound, they can still hear. Okay, so it's still going. So 5 minutes. 11:35, come back. Back on with Phyllis Wheatley and Mr. Huber is the only thing keeping us from lunch, so.
Thank God.
Go ahead.
Kind of power through.
Go ahead.
All right, good morning, everybody. So just a kind of brief overview of what I'm gonna cover. It's just our strategic plan, very similar to what Dave has shared with all of you. And then through that, I'll talk about IXL and DIBEL data. Being that we are a K-5 school, I do have some SBAC, DESA data to share with all of you. And then just kind of go over what we're doing to support student progress, how we're using our data. And then I am going to give you guys an opportunity to kind of look at some of the items our students are exposed to when they do take this SBAC assessment in the spring. So similar today, you know, we met as a SIT team over the summer, school improvement team, to develop our strategic plan. And so our goal, again, similar to Dane, focuses on achievement through DIBELS and IXL. So again, for DIBELS, our school is different in the fact that we solely focus on fluency. So how many words a student can read in 1 minute, okay? And so by the end of this school year, we want 65% or more of our students to either meet or exceed the end of year benchmark. And I'll go through those benchmarks in a couple minutes. And then for IXL, again, 65% or more students will increase their IXL score by 70 points or meet their grade level benchmarks as measured by the assessment. The reason we chose 70 is because a typical student should be growing 10 points a month. And so 7 months of school, 70 points. I would determine that. And then again, this is something new that I implemented this year because I do want to challenge my staff, and I'll get into more of why I chose this. But this one's a little bit geared more towards SBAC itself. And so by the end of this school year, our students that achieve proficiency in SBAC math and ELA will increase by 5%, by 5% in grade 3, 4, and 5. And I'll show you some data regarding all that. Then we did focus on attendance, which has been an initiative in our school for the past couple of years. And so similar to Dane, you know, we want to maintain that 90% of students being identified as on track, while working to reduce the overall number of students who are listed as chronically absent, just in an effort to promote consistent engagement. And so on track for attendance means that they've missed less than 10%, 14 days, 15 days. And then just to kind of give you some background, last year, we had 583 students that were at 90% out of 631. So our on track rate was at 92%, which was the highest that it has been since I've been followed it.
I like how you include the staff and the students' attendance in
We
the
do, yes.
weekly report.
Yeah, thank you. And then we kind of changed it up as far as behavior this year. So we did focus on relationships. So this year we are challenging our staff to submit positive office referrals, specifically 2 positive office referrals per month. It doesn't just have to be teachers. It can be cafeteria staff, custodial staff, interventionists, specialists, our spec ed services department, just to foster supportive and encouraging school culture. When we think of behavior, it's always reactive, right? This is more of a proactive approach. And so just again, to give you some background, last year, our referral numbers decreased from the previous school year from 186 to 136. So we saw a 26 decrease in our behavior referrals last year. The year before that, when you combine the 2 years, we've seen a 43% decrease in behavior. So while we could set more of a decreased percentage again, we all know that kids are going to make mistakes, right? Especially at my age, or at, you know, their age, they're still regulated. I mean, I do spoke with that too. But, you know, we kind of wanted to just kind of change it up a little bit and see what a more proactive approach does. I think we have some really good things in place right now as to why we're seeing decrease in referral numbers. One of the biggest reasons, or one of the biggest things this year for us is that we have a dean, which has been such a huge asset. And right now our referral numbers are actually down 18% compared to last year. So it's continuing to help. So going back to our IXL and DIBELS data, so when we look at DIBELS, like Mr. Sears said, it is a moving benchmark. So what students are expected to read in the beginning of the year, that target moves at the end of the year because obviously they're supposed to be more proficient readers as the school year goes in or goes on. So this year, the number of students or the percentage of students that came into us reading on grade level was at 52%. So you'll see in third grade, the benchmark for a typical third grader in the beginning of the year, they should be reading at 70 words per minute. A fourth grader should be reading at 90, and a fifth grader should be reading at 111 words per minute. And so these are the percentages broken down by grade level. When you average those out, we have about just over half of our school is currently reading on grade level. So then I just took it a step further because I wanted to see, well, how much, what percentage of students are already at the end of the year? So 28% of our students are already at the end of your benchmark. So when you think of third grade, you'll see that over the course of the year, a third grader's fluency in their words per minute should increase by 30 words per minute. They should start with 70, end with 100. A fourth grader should start at 90, end with 115. And then a fifth grader should start at 111 and end with 130 words per minute. So when you average that out, we have 28% of our students are already meeting those end of year proficiency benchmarks. Does that make sense to all of you? Right. And then on the flip side to that, for math, you'll notice that the numbers are very, very different, but we have 41% of our students already meeting beginning of the year benchmark. So we have, 58% of our third graders are already meeting the benchmark in third grade. 41% of our fourth graders, 25% of our fifth graders. You'll notice that this is drastically lower. And that again is just because of the assessment with math. There are so many skills and concepts that they're just not exposed to yet. But we always see a huge increase over the course of the year because they are getting on IXL. It's a consistent thing that they do almost every day for some of our students. And our teachers do a good job of, just monitoring that progress. And so that's what our IXL numbers are like. All right, so then this is just a brief overview of our SBAC data from last year, as well as our science and social studies. So this is a comparison to our data last year as when you compare it to the state. So we're in the right column, the state's in the left column. What's highlighted in green is the grade level and content area that was above the state proficiency. So you'll notice that fifth grade math and fifth grade reading were above the state. For our fourth grade and third grade math and reading, we were below. Some were just below by 3 or 4. You'll notice third grade was 11% below. I've had conversation with Snyder and Kelly about this. I can't tell you what attributed to that. I think it may be just an outlier year. I will say our third graders always do struggle the most because it is a new assessment. There's different question types that they're not exposed to right off the bat. Just maneuvering the test itself is very different and hard for them. And so I'm going to just kind of talk about some of the things we're doing to address those skills. And then this is just a subgroup. So I broke the data down even further by subgroup. So you'll see our school compared to the state with specific subgroups. So this is our African American subgroup and how we performed against the state. This is our Hispanic Latino. We have an amazing ML department. Our ML staff do an amazing job. The year before, we were actually above the state in everything. And you'll see that we were just short in third in math. But everywhere else we were above with our ML population, or I'm sorry, Hispanic Latino. And then we have students with disabilities and our active ML students. So my apologies, but that data is down here. But again, you'll notice we were above the state in most of those categories as well. And then this is just a comparison over the past 3 years. So you'll see this is 2 years ago, or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, last year. We had a really good year. 2 years ago, we were above the state in every area except fourth grade math, but only 4 percentage points off. But you'll notice that the state, their percentages really, they don't fluctuate that much, right? 1, 2, 3%. And so that 5% for our staff increasing, if we can get that, the data supports that we will be above the state if things pan out. So I just wanted to show you that just so you kind of have an idea of how that looks over time.
Zach, it's a good data point when you talk about like 3 or 4% in a class that's under 200 kids. It's really, you're talking 5 or 10 kids can really drastically change the percentages year to year. So that's one of the things that we kind of look at. Just one moment.
Yeah, and I'll get into it, but I did when I created the group for our reading radar program in my building, this is the data that I looked at. It was a huge piece, and I'll talk about that a little bit more.
Previous slide, student with disability.
Mhm.
Okay,
And I'm just gonna throw that out there that with our students with disability, our C-setting kids take this. So like our nonverbal autistic students are required to take this. So nope, nobody really can be exempt unless it's, parent request, but we don't promote that. We don't make that public. But every student in my building is required to take this assessment. That's how it is. And then this is our science and social studies data. Just to kind of give you some background, 5th grade, they take the science assessment in the spring, so they were above the state, last year. 4th grade social studies, this has looked different in years past, but for the past, I think 2 or 3 years, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, they've actually taken one assessment and have broken it up over the year 3 times. So there's 3 administrations of this social studies assessment, one in the fall, actually, they're taking their first assessment next week, then there's a January administration, and then there's a spring administration. And last year we had, his name Dusty, come by and he interviewed some of our staff and our students just about the assessment process. And what that looks like, and had a conversation, but you'll see, it's a lot. That social studies assessment is about 50 questions. And it's almost, takes them about 3 hours to do, at each administration as well.
Yeah, it's a heavy lift, it's a pre-test, and based upon the elementary schedule too, certain times of the year when kids have social studies,
Yeah.
or not, plays a part into it. But go ahead, Zach.
So just some of the things that we're doing, to support student progress. Obviously, we push on our staff, to really promote implementing our book learners and outreaches with integrity and fidelity to ensure consistency across classrooms. Peer support, we have a very thorough and robust MTSS process, that's overseen by Dr. Linebarger, our assistant principal. So just ensuring that our students are receiving tier 2 and tier 3 intervention. Also offering enrichment opportunities for our high achieving students as well. Sometimes I feel like that's a population that gets missed. But we do have a math interventionist who is also our gifted and talented teacher, and she works with our 4th and 5th grade students once a week, just to provide students with those enrichment opportunities. Assessment and data use. So going back to like that SBAC data piece, we have made a point to really push the staff and students administering an IAB once a month. What an IAB is, it's an interim assessment block. So it focuses on a specific standard or skill of that SBAC assessment, and the students will take that during class. And then the teachers and staff will look at that data during PLCs to identify the strengths of where the students did really well in. So for example, we just had our PLC today where the staff are doing it, but like our 5th grade, they did reading literary text. So they read a passage, they answer questions. And today what we found is that a lot of our students really struggled with like 2-part questions, a part A and a part B, but they did a really good job answering questions regarding figurative language. So understanding like what an idiom is or a simile. So just using that data to really kind of enhance that instruction. And then obviously, they're going to examine the data to help determine classroom. We look at that data to help determine classroom placements, student groupings, ensuring that, effective instructional practices are leveraged. And then collaboration for professional learning. Our staff also conduct peer walkthroughs. They're required to do 2 semester, but then as our school improvement team, we tap into our teachers and take them around to visit other classrooms too. So our next round will be in December, and we're going to invite our new teachers to join us on learning walks so they can go visit classrooms and have an opportunity to see what's taking place in other rooms and other grade levels. What do we do? So again, we review the IAB results to identify strengths and areas of improvement, use the information to adjust instruction, provide small group support, refine tier 2 and tier 3 interventions, and then again, using those peer walkthroughs. What are we doing in PLCs? Like I mentioned, we review the IAB data together to identify standards where we need support. It's just also an opportunity for them to talk about what's working in their classroom. There's a lot of value in teacher to teacher discourse. And so we do give them that time as well. And then, just using PLCs again to ensure consistency across classrooms, promote shared accountability. So then we do have the reading rater program, which we started last year. So in our building, our focus was prioritizing literacy proficiency to support students in achieving grade level reading skills, building a strong foundation for future academic success. I'm sure you all know, but the research shows that reading proficiency by third grade is a strong predictor for future academic success. Students who do not read on grade level by this benchmark are at higher risk of falling behind in other subjects. So again, the objective was by enhancing our literacy support efforts, we aim to provide students with the skills necessary to build a strong foundation for future educational success. And so I call these students fence sitters, Dr. Leonard calls them bubble kids. But basically, these are the kids, like Dane had said, that show up every day, good attendance, but are still just below that like benchmark. When we think of SBAC, they're like achieving at like a high 2. If they just had a little bit more practice, they could get to a 3. And so with this program, I kind of developed it to where they're focusing on fluency, right? Because we need them to read to be able to comprehend. So that was a piece. Embedding some comprehension skills in there, but then also really pushing the teachers to provide them opportunities to practice SBAC like questions. Because there is a lot of value in that. And again, for these kids, most of them, they know how to read, they can comprehend, but they just need that extra push. So providing them with those opportunities will hopefully move the needle from that 2 to a 3. And so that was our focus group last year, will be this year as well. Last year, I believe we had 20 students per grade level. And so we had about 60 kids attend. Of those 60 kids, almost 20% did move and grow. So we did see huge gains across the board. The only issue that we saw was that attendance kind of dipped towards the end because with spring, you have spring sports, a lot of extracurricular activities. And so I have some ideas to kind of hopefully keep attendance consistent for that history though.
So Zach, before we just move on, just real quick, as far as the attendance of the Reading Rater program, did you have any correlation of success from that program to SBAC?
Yeah, so 20% of those kids moved like a whole number, essentially, from 1 to a 2, a 2 to a 3, etc. And so with our 4th and 5th graders, 3rd grade, I had to just really look at like grades and fluency because they haven't taken the SBAC yet. But when I went back to look at those students, of the 23rd graders I had, I believe 15 had either scored 2 through 4. And, you know, again, just really kind of pushing that message of coming to school every day, wanting to be in this program, making it fun too. You know, we did a lot of, positive things for our kids that got them excited about the program because it is an hour and a half after the school day is already over, so they have to stay a little bit longer.
Has it been, do you think it would help with math as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Just a matter of money, resources.
Yeah.
Staff.
Yep, I mean, but if that's something, with Brandon and Kevin, if that's something they decide to do, we welcome it, but. And then these are just some examples of what students would see on this SBAC assessment. So I gave a reading and a math example for each grade level. So like here in reading, a student is writing a story for a teacher about doing a math problem in class. Read the draft sentences of the story and complete the task that follows. So they would have to read this after finishing the math problem. Michelle said, I think my answer is bad/incorrect. Ms. Jones asked, would it be good/helpful if I showed you a different way to do the math problem? And then it has the students, for each underlined pair of words, click on the word that best makes sense in the story. So they have to use their context clues to obviously identify like, okay, which choice is going to be the better of the two. And so that's just an example of what the assessment asks of our 3rd grade in reading. And then for math, they'll have questions that's just a simple equation, and they have to know how to manipulate this, right? So they go in, because it's not gonna let them type. They can't go on the keyboard and click, 9. They have to physically move their mouse, click 9, and then they move on. So that's just an example of 3rd grade. 4th grade, you'll see, this is like a passage. So on the left side of their screen, there's a passage that they have to scroll down and read. They can extend it if they click this button. And then on the other side of their screen, there's questions. And so, for example, this is a two-part question. So in part A, they have to choose the statement that best describes what the information presented in the text shows about the author's point of view. And then in part B, they have to pick the text evidence that best supports their answer in part A. So, yes, it's very involved.
And you are having your teachers implement this same type of questions throughout their instruction, so the kids are familiar
Yes,
as to the thinking process of how to answer the questions?
correct. Yep.
Perfect.
And then a fourth grade math, so select a statement that explains how the values of the numbers 6,230 and 62,300 are different. So they have to know place value, they have to know, you know, I'm not a math person, but. But they have to just, understanding that every time you are adding a place value is essentially growing by 10, essentially, right? Place value is huge in third and fourth grade. And then in fifth grade, so again, another reading passage, they have to read the paragraph and then they type in this text box down here, summarize the main idea from the paragraph. Use key details from the text to support your summary. So in this type of question, they have to type on the keyboard. So that's just an example of reading. And then math, this is an example where they have to plot the point on the graph. So manipulating their mouse to add the point with the coordinates shown.
So is that just a takeaway? I mean. There's obviously rigor.
Oh, yeah.
And also, you know, students being able to use the electronic device and all the tools in the test. But also, there's this narrative out there that, you know, the SBAC scores on these questions are equivalent to students' literacy, or they can't read. And I think that we just proved that that may not be true. Yes, they need literacy, they need to be able to read, but there's multi-faceted parts of these questions that our students are taking.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't put this in here, but like, another component of SBAC reading, speaking and listen, or listening. So the students will listen to about a 3-minute passage. And then they have to answer questions on it. There's no text. It's solely from listening.
Right.
And I know for a lot of our kids, like very hard, especially the younger the learner, the more visual learners they are in aesthetic, right? So. But yeah, just some insight as to what our students see in spring. Any questions?
Appreciate it, Zach. Thank you very much. It is 12 o'clock, so we're gonna break for lunch from 12 to 12:30. If there's anybody online, we're gonna end the meeting and come back at 12:30.
So I need a motion to move into executive session. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are in executive session. So